Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. And today, I am joined by a trailblazer. Her name is Lois Hollis. Lois is a shameguilt educator. She is a filmmaker. She's a counselor and an author. She has gotten shameguilt to be an independent study, and she has over 50 years of experience in the topic. She is also the creator of one of the first kidney dialysis machines. So she just has a wealth of experience and knowledge that she's going to be sharing with you guys today. So can't wait to jump into it. Lois, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Curtis, and thank you to your audience for listening. This is a very interesting topic, and people don't realize how interesting it is because we were told to not talk about it. So I'm walking up the hill, trailblazing up the hill.
You definitely are, and we are going to be talking about it today. But before we jump into it, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 78 years old last week, so I'm not going to take the whole hour because I could. My main focus since I was a teenager was really health. And that's way back in 1950-something. I became a nurse's aide at the hospital. And I went on to nursing school and getting my bachelor's degree and working with open heart surgery in its infancy in the 60s at University of Maryland. And then I was asked to join the kidney dialysis team. And they were just going from peritoneal dialysis to hemodialysis. And that's in 1966. And we brought forth a whole new way of helping people. Kidneys had shut down. Transplantation was really not viable at that moment. So the kidney dialysis really helped to bring to that level. And I helped with home hemodialysis as well. To do their dialysis, and it was very rewarding to bring forth something not been done before. But looking back on my life, I've always done that. When I was very successful, right? But somewhere around the 50s, I bottomed out and got very depressed, which is very unusual because I left the band, I just collapsed. And the reason is because I had a big childhood. You know how you forget those things that are way back somewhere in your life, really better process?
Absolutely.
So that I'm like everybody else, they call it middle age. Or midlife crisis, but all it is shame guilt coming down on you because you never got rid of what you gathered during childhood. But who told you that? Nobody. I went to Catholic school and they just put on more shame and guilt. So I'm just typical like everybody else. But my way was I was severely abused. So I had brain traumas, I had broken jaws, I had broken ribs. My neck was broken. So I was literally dying because of all the traumas, and I couldn't walk very well because of all the scoliosis. My lungs were compressed. So they said I could only live at 55 or 50 something because of my liver not working, lungs not working, and they were right. But I didn't feel like that I was dying. So the good Lord led me to a very special physician, chiropractor. Oh, you have to do the emotional work. And that's where I stood. And I was depressed and suicidal and anxious and went to therapy like most of us do. But I only got so far. Like I wasn't happy, but I wasn't willing to kill myself. Do you know that feeling? Anybody can relate to that one? But you're just not happy. So I had this realization about shame and guilt. And I came to learn that shame, guilt is the reason for all of the negativity. You don't have to go to therapy for depression. You don't have to go to therapy for anxiety. You don't have to go to therapy for procrastination or suicide. I mean, like I would be dead before I finish all the therapies. So shame, guilt is the reason that our positive emotions turn to negative ones. Now, this is not out there. I'm bringing in something new. We are already happy. We are already good. In fact, that's my new film, I'm Good. But when shame, guilt, energy comes into us by someone shaming us, positive emotions into negative ones, like compassion turns to depression. Our intuition turns to anxiety. And our passion turns to anger. How does that sound, Curtis?
That sounds just like typical shame guilt to me. And for those who don't know the definition of shame guilt, why don't you give us your definition of it?
Okay, now my definition is different than everybody else because we have not gotten right definitions since Adam and Eve. So we have always been down, 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 down. Shame and guilt are one energy. This confuses us because they say shame is bad and guilt is good. We need guilt to be moral. No, we don't need guilt to be moral. We just do things because it's the right thing. Like you, Curtis, you feel it's right to bring knowledge and information out to the public. And you're not going to feel guilty if you can do it. You're doing it because it's your reason for being. I too. Like I want to help somebody with their moving. I'm going to help them because I feel it's the right thing to do, not because I feel guilty if I don't. Now you can have remorse or regret, but I want to take guilt out of the language. Guilt and shame are an energy based upon humanity that brings us very, very, very low. Shame, guilt is an energy. So it's kind of like a computer virus. You know what happens when your computer gets a virus? What happens?
It's sick and it cannot operate the way that it needs to.
Right, and then your computer may be different than my computer. My office goes down and your Word goes down and my internet's working, but yours not. So it's all different. So it's hard to, make it like this is what happens, the symptoms, because each person is different, like each computer is different. While shame guilt is a negative energy, like a computer virus that comes into our bodies, because we are energy bodies, and it makes us mentally confused. You ever get shamed and not feeling good enough and you're so confused? Well, confusion is shame guilt. I don't say shame and guilt, I call it shame guilt. It's the same energy. When it comes into our emotions, they turn from positive to negative. Like your computer, it's good, then it turns into who knows what it is when it has the virus. I'm laughing because it's like strange, like how can the computer be so crazy? And also on a physical level, it changes the energy of organs so they can't operate properly. The kidneys can't get rid of toxins. The heart can't beat properly, right rhythm, because heart is electric. And when we do a lot of shame guilt energy, it starts to skip beats. And they have PVCs, they call it. They have arrhythmias, but it's the shame guilt energy that's obstructing it. You know, like you have a radio, your radio, and you have a supersonic noise come through. What happens to the frequency?
It gets thrown off.
Yeah. So that's the same thing. You know, you're perfect for this, Curtis, because shame guilt's an energy that comes into our beautiful, positive body and does, you know, causes chaos. But people don't see that. They don't understand it because nobody ever explained it to them. So when I see people, you know, it's a consultant or a therapist in groups, I can help somebody so quickly in a couple sessions rather than a couple years. Because we don't take each emotion, we just take shame, guilt, find it and get rid of it, and then all the emotions turn positive. It's like, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Well, let's talk about how to identify, release, and avoid feelings of shame guilt.
Behavior. Yes. Now, shame is when the virus or computer virus or the shame guilt energy comes into us, it affects the mind. And the medical world, I'm a nurse person, so I've been in the medical world forever. So the medical world has their own way of labeling things. So they call that energy shame. And when it's in the conscious mind, they call it guilt. But it's the same energy. And if everybody can just understand that they're the same, one is not good and one is not bad. They're both bad. There's no such thing as a healthy poison. Shame, guilt, energy is not healthy for us, and it doesn't belong to us. So if it's outside of us, what can we do? We can get rid of it. And never say my shame or my guilt, because you cannot own it. It doesn't belong to you. It's an energy put upon humanity that made us victims. And we don't want to be victims. Now, since this is important to say, because the only way to defeat your enemy is to know your enemy. And that's why I call myself an educator, because I help people understand what is shame, guilt, energy. In the medical world, if you have a virus in your brain, they call it meningitis. If you have the same virus in your stomach, they call it gastritis. If you have the same virus in your kidneys, they call it nephritis. Do you see where I'm going with this? So that's why they put shame goes in the unconscious mind and guilt in the conscious mind. They give it two different names, but it's the same thing. And that's what makes people confused. Did I explain that okay, Curtis?
You explained that perfect. Now, the next thing I would like for you to explain to us is tell us about your books and your films and what readers can expect and people watching your films, because you've created some important work in that field as well.
Yes, and I'll get to we have to identify shame, guilt. We have to release it and learn how to avoid it. And that's what I've done. In my newsletter, I have an ebook. It's called 500 Questions, One Answer. And it's 500 ways we shame ourselves or other people shame us. So we have to learn. See, our culture taught us to shame ourselves. I don't know about your life, but I definitely had a lot of shame because of the Catholic religion and an abusive childhood. And that's kind of normal in that area of life, but we still have it today with all the crazy health things that are going on. People are just shamed and they're doing things out of shame, not because it's the right thing to do. So anyway, if they would, anybody would like to know what shame guilt behaviors are, sign up for my newsletter. It's free, and you'll get 25 behaviors every week. So I'm teaching you what shame guilt is, and then I can help you release it, because then you know what it is. I do a lot of interpersonality work, like the inner critic. We talk to the inner critic and we make friends with the inner critic, because the inner critic is the one that gives the shame guilt energy to us. Okay. He's not a bad guy. He's a good guy. So once you know what shame guilt behaviors are, then you can avoid them. So it's really not that difficult. It's just learning things that you have never been taught. Because nobody has made shame guilt as an isolated, like nephritis. Somebody works with Alzheimer's, somebody works with alcoholism. Nobody says, I work with shame and guilt. Right, Curtis?
That's right. You're the first shame guilt educator that I know of.
I don't know anybody else either. So I'm like, I can't believe why this is so big. Nobody has said we need to make shame guilt all by itself as a study, because it involves every part of our being. You know, why aren't we successful? Because we don't feel good enough. You know, why? And that's prevalent. I mean, and our kids are shamed in school. We shame ourselves. I mean, it's a way of life, but that's not the way it's supposed to be. So I'm telling people that you don't have any enemy. You can't blame your mother or your father or your grandmother or the priest or the pope. You can only blame shame guilt energy. Now that's pretty cool.
It absolutely is. So tell us.
Because you can focus in on the shame guilt and not be scattered into, oh, I'm depressed, oh, my anxious, oh, my mother said this, oh, my, I wanted people to take all those things and just put it in a big thing, a funnel, and say, it's shame guilt. Let's work on shame guilt. And then everything else works. It's like if you have a leak in your house and you have to keep mopping up the rainwater on the floor. Every time it rains, what happens? You got to wipe it up. And that's what you do every time it rains. And then you say, if I just fix the hole in the roof, I don't have to worry about the rain coming anymore. And that's how I feel about shame guilt. People are dealing with depression for years, dealing with anxiety for years, and you're going to keep dealing with it, because unless you find the shame guilt energy that's feeding the depression, you're never going to get out of the depression. That's really, really sad, Curtis, because people feel even sadder and not good enough because they've been in therapy for 2 or 3 years and they're still depressed. In fact, they're more depressed because they lost a lot of money. So I offer the shame guilt information to all therapies. They have to include it in their work because it's the only thing that's going to stop the rain coming in your house. You got to fix the roof.
So you're also a filmmaker. So tell us about your film.
Well, I'm talking to you, and as I was many years ago, like 8-10 years ago, and people go, Lois, I really don't know what you're talking about. I'm going, don't you see this? I have a gift of sight. And so I said, I have to make a film of what I see so people can see what I see. So at 60-something years old, I entered film school. And it was much harder than I thought. But I made a film, and it's called Out of Discord into Harmony. It's 20 minutes. And it's me talking to my depression, my anxiety, my inner critic, making friends with the family. You know, we all have a family, but we have an inner family, just like our outer family that everybody doesn't see it the same way. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I do, is I help people self-heal. We all talk to ourselves. I'm just helping us to find a person inside of us to talk to. And then my other film, the first episode's just released, and that's 15 minutes. And it makes shame, guilt, energy visible so you can see how it's a green, slimy energy that comes into us and makes us depressed. And then when we get rid of it, we get positive again. And I have that on film. And it took a long time to make that, just because I couldn't find somebody to animate what I'm talking about. But I finally found somebody, and it's out there, and it's free. And it's called imgoodfilm.com.
imgoodfilm.com. So is there any other current projects or upcoming stuff that you're working on that people need to be on the lookout for?
Well, I'm working on episode 2 right now, and that should be completed in a week. So see, episode 1 first. And also there's an I'm Good film song. It's just so inspirational. I love it. I'm also on my website. I have pamphlets called Now is the Time. Now, these are readings I receive from Spirit. It's like God talks and I'm the secretary. So I write down what God says. And when you read these short paragraphs, it gets you out of the shame, guilt energy, which is really quite wonderful. It doesn't get rid of it, but it gives you that positive emotion that you can start healing. Because, a lot of times people are negative and they can't get positive enough to heal. I've been there. And that's not a good place to be in, because you don't have the energy to be positive. So if you read my words, the paragraphs, now is the time, you get that spark. It raises your vibration. And when you raise your vibration, shame, guilt, energy gets kicked out of your personality.
Well, you gave out imgoodfilm.com, so go ahead and give out the rest of your contact information.
The website is Lois Hollis, LoisHollis.com. And if you go to that website, you'll get my newsletter, you'll get the film. You can also get it on imgoodfilm.com, but you can get a lot of other things that I do. And you can read a lot of the testimonials that people have given me. And I also talk to anybody that's interested in working with me. You can call me for 15 minutes or so, because this is a new way of healing, and a lot of people have a lot of questions. So you are able. So I'm very accessible. Let's put it that way. I don't hide my phone number. So any other questions, Curtis?
Give us some final thoughts to close it out.
Okay, there's one quote I have. Shame, guilt is not ours to own or to give. I'm good.
And I am good with this interview. And listeners, I want you to be good with this interview, and I want you to follow, rate, review, and share this to as many people as possible so they can be good as well. And Android listeners, be good. Go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast. Lois, I'd like to thank you for joining me today.
Well, Curtis, it's been an absolute pleasure. And you have a good Christmas and an awesome Happy New Year. And just singing the I'm Good song.
You do the same. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.